Get out of the wedding. You have nothing to be proud of. That's what my mother screamed at me and my wife. Right in the middle of my sister's wedding over a year ago. Even though I had paid $25,000 to cover the entire cost of that day, she still kicked us out. All because my wife wasn't dressed fancy enough and had embarrassed her. Surrounded by noise, judgmental stares, and a room full of people, I had two choices. Quietly walk away so the wedding could go on smoothly, or stand up for the woman I love, no matter the consequences. I chose to stand up for her. Let me take you back to what really happened that day, and tell me this: was I wrong for choosing the woman who's always stood by me, over a family that no longer sees me as one of their own? Hello everyone, I'm Thomas, 32 years old, and currently the chief financial officer at a multinational corporation. I live a relatively quiet life and value independence and clarity in everything I do, including relationships. My wife, Violet, is 28 and works as an elementary school teacher. She doesn't come from a wealthy family, nor does she wear flashy clothes or live up to the kind of glamour people might expect. But I love her, for her sincerity, the way she sees the world with compassion, and the kindness she shows to children I once thought no one could have the patience for. We just got married 2 weeks ago. It was a small but warm ceremony at an upscale restaurant in the heart of the city. Most of my friends and relatives were there, and Violet was surrounded by the people who loved her. But there was one thing that kept the day from being truly complete. My parents weren't there. Not because they were busy, not because of distance or health issues. The truth is, I didn't invite them. And it all goes back to a conflict that happened a year ago at my sister Naomi's wedding. Naomi and I grew up in an ordinary household. My dad was an electrical engineer, and my mom worked an admin job at a local hospital. Life was never extravagant, but we never went without anything we truly needed. Naomi is 6 years younger than me, and ever since she was born, my parents' attitude toward me started to shift. Gradually but noticeably, like a clock hand silently slipping out of alignment. I still remember clearly what it was like in those early years when I was their only child. Back then, every scraped knee had my mom in a panic. Every scribbled drawing I made was treated like a masterpiece and proudly taped to the wall by my dad. I used to believe that kind of love would never change. Then Naomi came along. A tiny, fair-skinned baby girl with a sweet laugh. Someone people naturally wanted to hold. And just like that, everything seemed to shift. So quickly, I didn't even get the chance to ask why. I stopped being the subject of proud stories told to neighbors. I was no longer carried to bed when I stayed up late. Birthday presents became simpler, no longer filled with surprises like before. All the attention seemed to flow in a different direction. And strangely enough, I wasn't hurt by it, because I understood Naomi was my little sister. I always believed that if my parents' love could help her grow up happy, then it was okay for me to step back quietly. As I got older and entered my early years of high school, I began to see more clearly where I stood in the family. It wasn't just a vague feeling anymore. It was a noticeable difference in the way my parents treated me compared to my sister. The older Naomi got, the more charming and quick-witted she became, and she seemed to command all the attention in the house. My parents constantly reminded me to let her have her way, saying, "You're the older brother. You need to think ahead," or "Naomi's still little. She doesn't know any better." At first, those words sounded reasonable. But over time, as they repeated at the dinner table, during games, and even in moments that hardly mattered, they started leaving marks I didn't even recognize right away. I wasn't selfish, but I was a teenage boy, and the feeling of being pushed aside, even just a little, started to wear on me. There were moments when I truly felt jealous. I snapped when she was defended, even though she was the one at fault. I got frustrated when my mom made me give up my toys, my seat, or even my study time to watch over her. And at times, I hated my little sister. But the strange thing is, Naomi was also the one who made it impossible to hate her. I remember one time I was sketching a comic book character when she quietly sat down beside me, rested her chin in her hands, and whispered, "Thomas, you're the best person in the world." Then she hugged me and tucked herself into my chest like it was the safest place she knew. Another time, I overheard her bragging to her classmates, saying, "My brother can do everything. He's great at sports, he draws really well, and he never yells at me. He's my superhero." I stood frozen at the stairwell after hearing that, my heart softening in a way I didn't expect. Naomi wasn't the kind of spoiled kid who thought she deserved everything or took people for granted. She knew when to be quiet. She knew when to step back so I could breathe. Whenever I was down after being scolded by Mom, Naomi would quietly come over and slip a cookie into my hand or hand me a crooked little card with, "I'm sorry," scribbled in crayon. And in those quiet, thoughtful ways, she made me forget the resentment I once carried. Time passed and we grew up, each going our separate ways. After graduating college, I moved out on my own, slowly settling into a quiet, independent life and building my career. Naomi stayed behind, growing closer to our parents and, over time, naturally becoming the center of nearly every family decision, as if it had always been meant to be that way. We weren't as close as we'd been as kids, but we still kept in touch. Every few weeks, she'd call to check in, sometimes asking for feedback on a presentation to show off a cake she'd successfully baked. I always answered, always listened, always kept a comfortable distance, close enough to care but far enough to stay guarded. Then, one afternoon just over a year ago, I got a call from my father. I was at the office, wrapping up the last few reports of the day. His name flashed on my screen, and for some reason, I picked up right away, an instinct I didn't usually have with calls from home. His voice came through, short but urgent. "You should come home. There's something important." I asked what it was, but he didn't explain. He just repeated, "It's a family matter. The sooner, the better." I hung up, feeling a familiar heaviness. Not from worry, but from the weight I always seemed to carry whenever I was summoned home. It was the same feeling I'd had before, like I was being pulled into some unspoken expectation I wasn't sure I wanted to meet. That night, I returned to the old house. The same house I hadn't stepped into since Naomi's birthday 2 years ago. I went alone. Not because Violet didn't want to come, but because I didn't want to bring her back to a place that had once hurt her so deeply. At that birthday party, I brought Violet home with the simple intention of introducing the woman I loved to my parents. She was still a bit shy back then. She wore a modest dress and brought a box of homemade cookies as a gift for Naomi. After a few polite greetings, everything seemed fine, until my mother asked what Violet did for a living. The moment she heard Violet was a kindergarten teacher, she paused and nodded slowly, like she was confirming something she'd already made up in her mind. Midway through dinner, as the conversation drifted toward education and Violet's job, my mother suddenly spoke. She didn't look at anyone, but her voice was loud enough for the whole table to hear. "Being a kindergarten teacher isn't a real profession. It's just paid babysitting." Her words dropped onto the table like a stone hitting a still lake. Violet froze. She didn't say a word. She just lowered her head and gave a faint smile, the kind you use when you're trying to hide how deeply something has cut you. I didn't respond right away. I looked at my mother, stood up, pulled out Violet's chair and said, quietly but loud enough for everyone to hear, "If you can't show Violet respect, then maybe we don't belong at this party." And just like that, we left. Violet hasn't set foot in that house since. And me, since that day, I haven't been the obedient son I once was. That shift alone was enough for my mother to start harboring even more resentment toward Violet, even though she never once said a disrespectful word to her. As I was still lost in my thoughts, the door suddenly swung open. It was my mother. She stood there with her arms crossed, eyes sweeping quickly from head to toe before landing on the space beside me. Her voice cut through the room, cold and sharp, like she'd been rehearsing it. "You didn't bring that girl with you. Good. I don't want to see her face." I looked up, kept my voice calm, and said slowly, word by word, "If you say that again, I won't ever come back to this house." She didn't respond, but her lips pressed into a thin line, and for the first time in a very long time, I saw something in her face that wasn't victory. It was hesitation. A few seconds later, my father stepped out of the kitchen. He wore an old sweater, his expression serious but not tense. His voice came short and clear. "Come in. We need to talk." I nodded and we walked into the living room. Dinner that evening wasn't just with my parents. Naomi was there too. As I stepped into the room, I saw her sitting on the sofa, hands clenched in her lap, eyes filled with nervous energy when she saw me. She gave me a slight nod but didn't say a word. My father sat across from me. He crossed his arms, leaned back, and looked at me directly, as if presenting something that had already been carefully discussed. He said, "Naomi's getting married. The ceremony is in a month. We're in the middle of planning." I nodded slightly. That didn't surprise me. I knew she had a boyfriend, and marriage seemed like a natural next step. Then his tone shifted and dropped a little deeper. "She's pregnant, 2 months along. Your mother and I want to get things done quickly and quietly. But the costs, well, they're hard to cover right now. Work's been rough lately, and Naomi's out of a job." He paused as if gauging my reaction, then continued, "We'd like your help. Around $25,000. That'll cover the wedding dress, the reception, and the venue deposits." When he finished speaking, I leaned back in my seat and looked straight at Naomi. With my current job, $25,000 wasn't something I had to think long and hard about. But what made me pause was Naomi's silence. I asked her calmly, "You've been working for 3 years. You didn't manage to save anything?" She didn't answer. Her lips tightened. Her eyes shifted away from mine. That's when my mother jumped in, her voice protective and defensive. "She's been paying off student loans, rent, everyday expenses. Not everyone is as well off as you, Thomas." I didn't say anything right away. A few minutes passed in silence. No one pushed me, they knew I needed a moment. After thinking it through, I gave a slight nod. I didn't look at anyone as I spoke. I just kept my voice even. "Okay, I'll help." The whole room exhaled, like someone had just opened a window after holding their breath. But I wasn't done. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and looked directly at my father as I added, "I'm not giving anyone cash. I'll be the one signing the contracts with the venue. Every payment will go directly to the organizers. No middlemen. No handing money to family." At that, my father glanced at my mother. My mother glanced at Naomi. Naomi still didn't look at me. After a long pause, they agreed. A few days later, on a quiet weekend afternoon, I drove over to pick up Naomi. We had planned to visit the venue to finalize the booking and stop by a bridal shop to look at dresses. Everything went exactly as agreed. Every transaction was under my name. The contracts, the receipts, the payment confirmations, nothing slipped past my control. I'm not a suspicious person by nature, but I learned early on, when it came to my parents, money rarely ended up where it was supposed to, unless I was the one steering the wheel. I used to believe helping family was simply the right thing to do, until one incident changed that. It was a few years back. My mom called me mid-month, saying my dad urgently needed $2,000 for a medical checkup. I didn't ask questions. That same night, I wired the money. 3 days later, I stopped by their house unannounced. On the dining table was a brand new cold-pressed juicer, a still-packaged golf set, and a brochure for a discounted vacation to Florida, while my mom excitedly chatted with the neighbors over coffee. From that moment on, I stopped trusting them with money, and I never sent another dollar without knowing exactly where it was going. After I finished paying for everything, from the venue deposit to the wedding dress, and saw the joy in Naomi's eyes, I knew I had done the right thing. She stepped out of the boutique, glowing, clutching the carefully wrapped white dress in her arms, unable to hide her excitement. As we stood by the car, she turned to thank me. It's the same gentle voice, the same look of quiet gratitude I'd always known. That's how Naomi's always been. Thoughtful, grounded, never taking what I did for granted. That evening, driving home through the city lights with soft jazz playing in the background, I let myself believe. Maybe things were finally getting better. After everything, after footing nearly the entire bill for her wedding, after choosing not to bring up the past or hold on to grudges, maybe my parents would begin to see me differently. Not as the cold, distant son. Not just the brother who kept to himself, but as part of this family, truly. But then, 3 days before the wedding, my mother reminded me exactly why I should never let my guard down with her. That day, I was at the office, pouring a cup of coffee, when her name lit up my phone screen. The moment I picked up, her voice came through, sharp and commanding, like she was reading from a script. "The wedding's in 3 days. You'll come alone. Don't bring that girl. That girl. Not your girlfriend. Not Violet. Just that girl. Violet. The woman who had stood by me through every storm, who had faced life's trials with me without ever once asking for more than respect. In my mother's eyes, she was nothing more than that girl." I stood by the window, the paper cup warming my hand like a warning. I asked quietly, "Why?" My mother didn't even pause. It was like she'd been waiting for the question. "She's an embarrassment to the family. It's not just her job as a teacher. It's how she dresses. Plain, unrefined. One look, and you can tell she's not on our level." I closed my eyes, and in that moment, something inside me, something long suppressed, began to harden. I took a slow breath and answered, each word deliberate, firm, not raised in anger, but heavy enough to end the conversation. "That's enough. I don't want to hear anymore, and if you keep this up, I won't be seeing you again." Then I hung up, and in that exact moment, I knew one thing with complete clarity. This wedding would not be the simple family affair I had once hoped for. On Naomi's wedding day, everything was set. As I buttoned the last clasp on my vest, Violet stepped out from the dressing room. Her light blue dress hugged her frame with soft elegance. Modest, graceful, exactly who she was. She walked over and adjusted my collar in silence. Then she paused, hesitated, and looked up at me. Her voice came out barely above a whisper, like she was afraid saying it aloud might shatter something fragile between us. "Maybe you should go alone." I froze, holding her gaze. "What did you just say?" I asked softly but clearly. She didn't look away, but I noticed her hands tightening around each other in front of her dress. "I just think maybe it would be better if I didn't go," she said slowly. "Your family, they won't be happy to see me there." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stepped closer, wrapped my arms around her, and gently pulled her into my chest. My voice dropped low but firm. "Don't worry, I'm here, and I'll protect you." About an hour later, we left the house and arrived at the venue earlier than most guests. As the bride's brother, I wanted to be there ahead of time, to see Naomi in her dress, to make sure that at least part of this day would carry absolute joy. But just as we walked into the reception hall, my mother, standing near the welcome table, chatting with some relatives, turned and spotted us. She froze. Her smiling face dropped instantly. She didn't say a word at first. They just stared at me, then gave Violet a long, unmistakably disapproving glance. Then she began walking toward us. Each step of her heels echoed like a warning knock on a door no one wanted to answer. No smile, no greeting. She tilted her head toward me, voice low, clipped, and full of command. "Come with me, both of you." Without hesitation, I turned to Violet, gave her hand a reassuring squeeze, and followed my mother. The moment the three of us stopped in the hallway behind the reception hall, my mother spun around. She stood tall, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her sharp eyes flicking past me before landing squarely on Violet. Her voice came out low but tight with restraint. "Do you not understand plain language, Thomas? I told you not to bring her." I knew then this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. I straightened up, shifted slightly in front of Violet, half shielding her, and tried to keep my voice calm. "This is Naomi's wedding. I'm her brother. Violet is my fiancée. Her being here is completely appropriate." My mother narrowed her eyes, then let out a short, bitter laugh. Her words dripped with sarcasm. "Fiancée? A girl who teaches kindergarten? I've held my tongue, Thomas, but today is a big day. I won't have people whispering behind our backs just because you brought someone so plain, so cheap-looking." At that, Violet squeezed my hand tighter. Her hand had gone cold, but it didn't shake. She said nothing, and somehow, that silence hurt me more than if she had cried. I turned to my mother, lowered my voice, but let each word land like a stone. "I don't care what people think, but I do care about the way you're treating the woman I love." She let out a longer laugh this time, cold and bitter like frost breaking glass. "The woman you love? Let me ask you this. Are you trying to play the hero? Do you think dropping $25,000 gives you the right to do whatever you want?" I took a deep breath, still holding Violet's hand, steadying myself, grounding myself in her. My voice stayed even but firm. "I've never once brought up that money and never used it to ask for anything. But since you mentioned it, yes, I think I deserve a little respect. At the very least, not to be treated like an outsider when I'm the one who signed every single contract for this entire event." My words must have struck a nerve. Her pride flared, and her voice rose to a near scream. "You think you should be proud of that 25 grand? And then, in one of those moments I'll never forget, in a cold, narrow hallway with no one to witness it, no eyes watching but ours, she shouted, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear, 'Get out of the wedding! You have nothing to be proud of.'" The words rang out like a slap with no hand. They echoed off the walls, then echoed again inside my chest. After my mother said those words, I stood still for a moment, breathing in slowly, like I needed that breath to hold back the wave rising inside my chest. Then I looked at her, and with a calm, steady voice, low, but clear enough that not a single word would be missed, I said, "All right, if that's how you feel, then I have nothing left to stay for." I gripped Violet's hand tightly, turned around, and walked straight out of that hallway, toward the reception area, the very room where, a month ago, I had signed the wedding contract myself and wired the full payment in advance. At the front desk, I asked to speak with the venue manager. My tone stayed calm as I explained my request and referenced the terms in our agreement, adding a few specific instructions. A few minutes later, the manager politely stepped out with me and Violet. Together, we walked toward the center of the hall, where my parents and Naomi stood with a small group of relatives. His voice rang out clearly across the room. Apologies, but as requested by Mr. Thomas, the contract holder, we will begin closing down the event space in 20 minutes. Our staff will assist guests in leaving the premises shortly after. The room went dead silent. My father's eyes widened in disbelief. My mother's face turned red with rage. They rushed toward me. My father barked, voice trembling with fury. "Have you lost your mind, Thomas? You're really going to ruin your sister's big day." Then my mother, seemingly forgetting the cruel words she had just hurled at me, shouted, "Who do you think you are? Canceling everything. What are you trying to prove?" I didn't respond to their anger. I looked them both in the eye and said, my voice low but unwavering, "If you can't show respect to the woman I'm going to marry, then I have no reason to pay for your celebration." That sentence cut through the air. The room froze. Then, just as quickly, their tone shifted. My father's voice dropped, and his gaze slipped to the side. My mother's posture softened, and her expression changed, like regret had finally crept in. My dad spoke first, quieter now, almost pleading. "If you do this, how are we supposed to face our relatives?" Then my mother stepped forward, for the first time all day, meeting my eyes not with anger but something closer to apology. "Please, don't do this. I know I was wrong earlier." But even as they lowered their voices, I held mine steady. Not angry, not emotional, just firm. "All right," I said. "If you agree this is a loan, then I'll let the event continue." My father stiffened. His voice rose again, offended. "A loan? You'd force your parents to sign a loan agreement?" I shook my head, eyes locked on his. "No, you forced this, not me." And in the end they agreed, because they knew, if they pushed me any further, once the groom's family and the rest of the guests arrived, it wouldn't be me who looked bad, it would be them. Moments later, under the watchful eyes of the restaurant manager and the security cameras in the reception room, a loan agreement was drafted. The terms were laid out clearly, and my parents, in their elegant clothes on what should have been their proudest day, signed it like they were swallowing something far more bitter than failure. Once the paperwork was complete, I took Violet's hand and walked out of that wedding. No goodbyes, no second glance. Behind me, I heard Naomi calling for me to stay, but I didn't stop walking. Not because I didn't love my sister, but because I knew, if I didn't walk away that day, I might never retake another step for myself. After that party, I never saw them again. No calls, no texts, not even a word from our parents. I handed everything related to the $25,000 over to my lawyer. I didn't want any more conversations. I just wanted clarity. But then, about a month after the wedding, on a Saturday afternoon, I had just gotten back to my apartment after a long morning meeting when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole I saw Naomi and her husband. I opened the door, didn't say a word. I just quietly stepped aside to let them in. Naomi sat on the couch like she was carrying a heavy weight on her chest. Her hand gently rested on her belly. It wasn't that noticeable yet, but I knew. The baby was there. After a moment, Naomi was the one who spoke. Her voice was soft but steady. We came to return the money." She opened her bag, pulled out a stack of cash, and placed it on the table. I looked at it, then looked at Naomi. Her eyes dropped. She pressed her lips together, like she was trying to hold back tears, and slowly began to speak. "After that day, Mom and Dad blamed me. They said I had to take responsibility because I was the one who accepted the money. But you know what? For years now, I've been paying all their electricity bills, water bills, and even their medication. I never told anyone because I thought that's just what kids are supposed to do. So when you asked why I didn't have any savings, it's because all my money went to them." I didn't respond. I just looked at her. The little sister I had always thought was more loved, more protected, and had it easier than me. But that day I saw a different Naomi. A Naomi who was holding herself together to carry everything, just like I once did. In my head, two opposing thoughts twisted around each other. Part of me, hardened and wary, believed our parents had figured out how much I cared about Naomi and were using that. Maybe they were the ones who sent her, hoping those grateful eyes would melt my resolve once again. But the other part of me, The part that still remembered how Naomi used to proudly tell her friends, "My brother Thomas is the best person in the world." That part believed she was telling the truth. After a few minutes of silence, I let out a sigh, then gently pushed the stack of cash back toward her. Naomi looked up, her eyes brimming with tears, surprised. I looked her straight in the eye and said slowly, "This money, it's not for you." I paused, my gaze shifting briefly to her belly, and continued, "This money is for the baby you're carrying." Right at that moment, Naomi broke down in tears, no longer holding anything back. She covered her face, trembling. And me, I just sat there, didn't say a word, just let her cry. There are things in life that don't need to be taken back. Some debts, when paid with love, leave no one owing. And some tears, when they fall, are enough to mend what's been broken. I don't remember exactly how long Naomi stayed after that. I remember that the whole time, she didn't say another word. She just sat there, hands wrapped gently around her belly, tears occasionally slipping from her eyes. Quiet, like someone who had finally laid down a burden she'd carried for far too long. When she stood up to leave, Naomi took my hand. For the first time in years, that grip didn't carry guilt or a thank you. Carried understanding. Not the kind between a big brother and a little sister who had once been favored, but between two people who had grown up in the same house, where neither of us ever really felt fully loved. About 2 months later, I got a message from Naomi. It was a photo of an ultrasound. Below it, just 3 words, "Thank you, my brother." I stared at the screen for a long time. In that image was a tiny, blurry shape still undefined. But I knew I had just sent something good out into that little one's life. Not through money, but through something I once wished I had when I was a child. A quiet kind of protection, given without conditions. Since then, Naomi and I have started talking more. Not all the time, no expectations, but just enough for me to know that even if my relationship with our parents has cracked with Naomi, there's still a part of the family I can come home to. As for my parents, about 3 months after Naomi's wedding, they suddenly showed up at my door one weekend afternoon. No warning, no call ahead, just the sound of the doorbell right as I was about to make 2 cups of coffee for Violet and me. I opened the door and saw them standing there, dressed neatly, their faces no longer tense like the last time we met. My mother smiled faintly as if nothing from the past had ever happened. My father glanced around the apartment like he was weighing whether or not to sit down. A few minutes later, after some awkward small talk, they got to the point. It was my father who spoke, his voice calm and direct. "We're planning to open a restaurant with an old friend. We need around 50,000. Can you help?" I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even upset. I just looked at them and answered in an even tone. "I'm not saying no, but this time I need collateral. Specifically, the house you're living in." That sentence changed my mother's expression. She looked up at me, lips tight like she was about to say something, but then gave a small laugh, pretending to stay composed. "Thomas, we're your parents. If you can't help, it's fine. But why make us sign loan papers like strangers?" I leaned back in my chair, eyes still on them, and replied with a steady voice. Not harsh, just as cold as the truth. "From the day you told me to get out of the wedding, there hasn't been any us anymore." No one said anything after that. No explanations. No apologies. No arguments. They just stood up, their polite act quickly fading, and walked out the door like they'd never been there. Since that day, they've completely disappeared from my life. No more texts. No more calls. Not a single word. And I haven't looked for them either, because some relationships, once they're cut, hurt less the quieter they stay. And then, 2 months ago, on a quiet afternoon, I officially proposed to Violet after nearly 4 years together. She froze for a few seconds when I asked, but then smiled. Tears shimmered at the corners of her eyes as she nodded. She said yes, gently, without hesitation, like she had known the question was coming and had been waiting for it for a long time. A few days later, as we started going over the guest list, Violet hesitantly asked me, "Have you thought about inviting your parents?" I stayed quiet for a moment, not out of anger, but because I wanted her to understand. I don't allow anyone who's ever hurt you to be at our wedding. Violet didn't say anything more. She just nodded. But I knew that nod wasn't agreement, and it wasn't resignation. It was respect. She understood and didn't try to change me, because real love isn't about convincing someone to forgive. It's about learning how to move forward together when both of you still carry your scars. And now, we're simply enjoying our moments of happiness. In a small apartment with a sunny balcony, morning coffee made together, quiet evenings cooking dinner, playing soft music, and talking about the most ordinary things. There's no longer anyone around who treats love like a bargaining chip. No one left, forcing me to choose between family and self-respect. Just the two of us, two people, two pasts, but one shared future. And if there's one lesson I've taken from everything that's happened, it's this: family isn't always a safe place. And not everyone tied to you by blood deserves a place in the most sacred moments of your life. There are boundaries once crossed. Forgiveness is no longer an obligation. Some wounds don't need to be explained, only protected. And there are people, no matter how much you once loved them, if they never learn to value you, then walking away isn't cruel. It's growth. Always stand with the one who stood by you when no one else did. Because sometimes, the most essential thing to protect isn't the harmony of a toxic family. It's the peace in the home you're building. And before I wrap up today's story, I want to ask you, those of you who've stayed with me until the very last moments, was I wrong for deciding not to invite my parents to my wedding? Was I wrong for asking them to sign a loan agreement at my sister's wedding, just because I no longer wanted my kindness to be taken for granted? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to know, if you were in my shoes, what would you have done? And if this story made you pause, it touched something in you, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share it with someone you think might need this perspective too. Thank you for listening. See you again in the following story.
Did you enjoy my story? What a journey it has been. I truly wonder, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have chosen silence to keep the peace, or would you have done what I did to reclaim your dignity? Let's meet in the comments below. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. I'm reading every single one. Which city are you listening from tonight? If my story resonated with you, you can support me and help me bring more stories like this to the world by sending a super thanks. Your sweet support means the world to me and allows me to continue this journey with all of you. On the screen now, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend you watch next. There are so many more on my channel, each with its own lessons and triumphs. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here with me. Until the next story, with love and respect.